Hello, everybody. This is Kirk Spano with Investing 2020's interviews, and I am joined by Dr. Sean Stein-Smith at Lehman College in New York, and also a columnist at Forbes, and I will be sharing those links with you. We're going to talk about cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, the flippening, and we're going to start right off with what happened last night with Tesla deciding they're not going to accept Bitcoin. And man, we could talk for days and days and days about this stuff. We could do a whole website about this. If anybody has a great idea on a website, I'm going to suggest one on cryptocurrency or Bitcoin if nobody's done that yet. And, we'll see what we can figure out today. Sean, how are you doing?
Excellent, Kirk. Excellent.
Happy to be here. Good. The last time we talked, I asked if your favorite restaurant was open yet. Is it?
It is going to be open starting, I think, next week. So
that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
I just got news from the Milwaukee Brewers today that we're going to 100% capacity at what used to be Miller Park and now is American Family Field. So I will be checking to see if I can get a discount on insurance now that I've said that out loud. So Elon Musk doesn't want to take Bitcoin for Teslas anymore. And I'm just kind of flabbergasted. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, to be totally honest with you, it's honestly hit me out of totally left field here, right? Because, I mean, obviously, Elon Musk has been pro-crypto, pro-Bitcoin, Dogecoin over the last maybe 3-4 months. And to then have him come out in the evening after the market closed, basically saying that going forward, Tesla, one, is not going to be taking Bitcoin as a payment option going forward, and two, doing so because of concerns over the energy cost, carbon footprint of Bitcoin mining. I kind of thought that was a bit contradictory, right? Because on the other hand, Tesla is not selling any of its current Bitcoin holdings. And then two, it's also always critical, I think, to point out that, yes, obviously there is energy used to mine Bitcoin, but I believe anywhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the power used to mine Bitcoin is actually solar, wind, other non fossil fuel actual forms of energy. And then two, I mean, in order to make the EV cars, batteries, panels, all the rest, all of that also has a huge carbon footprint up front. So I'm not quite sure what the ultimate goal is. I mean, I personally do believe that there is something else going on, either in a back room, under the surface, that really isn't public yet.
Yeah. Could that backroom discussion have anything to do with a crypto dollar or a digital dollar coming out, or at least there being news of one maybe this autumn?
Well, I do know that that there had been some pilot projects launched. I believe the digital dollar project actually launched 5 tests options. Basically, and I believe they dropped those back in April. So there has been quite a bit of progress made on this sort of crypto dollar, blockchain based dollar idea. But I would say yes, partially, but I also have to highlight that actually Tesla has not sold, at least publicly, any of their holdings. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here, because if the firm still has that exposure on their corporate balance sheet, having their top person, CEO, founder, honestly face of the firm, coming out and putting downward pressure on crypto isn't really meshing up for me.
Yeah, so they're not saying that they're selling any Bitcoin right now. They did sell a little bit going into their earnings. So they sold, I don't know if it represented their entire profit, but it was a little north of $100 million. So they started
Correct.
with 1.5 billion, and I believe the appreciation, if I got the approximate numbers right, the approximate appreciation should have been 300 or 400 million. I haven't looked at their quarterly statement yet, so I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but they trimmed a little bit. And I wonder if, he looks at that as a store of value long term. I think there's a pretty strong argument for it as the digital version of gold. I think that that's going to end up being legitimate long term. What do you think about that as one alternative to stores of wealth?
So in terms of the future state for Bitcoin, I would say that really for at least the next maybe 3, 5, 7, 10 years, Bitcoin simply is not going to be used as a real currency option, right? Everybody wants to be paid in Bitcoin, be it Tom Brady, be it other high-profile athletes of that kind, right? There are folks wanting to be paid in Bitcoin, but I personally don't hear too many people actually wanting to use Bitcoin as a transactional option to actually pay for goods and actual services. So I think right now, short to medium term, the best bull case for Bitcoin price is, to your point, to have it serve as sort of the updated version of a gold-esque asset class. Whether that actually plays out is a whole other issue, because if it is truly going to be a store of actual value, a tweet from a CEO should not cause it to drop 10% overnight.
Right. So I know that most people don't know the official definition of money. So you're an economist. I tried to be. So it's unit of account, store of value, and medium of exchange.
Yep.
So I think the store of value is going to be right. I think that's going to be something because it is a scarce asset. And as long as there's people who want it, it can be that store of value. The medium of exchange is where I think we're going to run into a lot of problems because it's just going to be difficult. I'm a believer that the central banks and the governments will protect their sovereign currencies, and we're going to head in that direction in a second. So as a medium of exchange, and as a guy who's used a little bit on gambling sites, and apparently somebody just used it to get paid on the Colonial Pipeline ransom, I think it's going to be tough to incorporate any non-sovereign crypto into the medium of exchange element of money. Do you think that's difficult, isn't it?
I would say so, yes, right. And there are really two sort of angles here, right? One is from a sort of operational side, technical side. Is it possible? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely possible for a coin or a token, be it ETH, XRP, USDT, Circle USD, any of those options, right, to become a actual currency alternative. But to your point, I just don't see how the US, the EU, China, India, Latin America, African countries, anybody is actually going to be willing to have this sort of non-controlled currency out in the marketplace, basically serving as a competition for their own sort of fiat-based, managed, controlled currency. I just don't see it right now.
Right. Yeah, maybe the world evolves that way. By the time we get to Buck Rogers in the 25th century, was it, or 24th century? Maybe that happens. So, what's an example of cryptocurrency as a unit of account? Then, how does that get paired up?
So I think probably the best application or the best current example of crypto, right, be it Bitcoin, other crypto, all the rest, being used as sort of a fundamental unit of account for a company, I would honestly say that the organizations that are running in the DeFi area, right, decentralized finance space, are entities, right? Right, that actually are all built on, operate, use, transact in coins, tokens, all the rest, and then to have that be basically how their whole firm operates. And there are some on ramps and off ramps to either convert fiat into coins or coins into fiat. But I would say that the best applications right now are those firms in that sort of DeFi area that are built on and wholly in closed, really, in a coin based ecosystem.
So in the DeFi space, it's almost like there's two different worlds here, and then they have to be connected somehow.
Yeah. Yep.
So within the DeFi space, they can be decentralized, but they still have to jump to the other world from time to time.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, I would say that right now, sort of those sort of fiat and crypto worlds do have to be bridged, and actually, I would argue personally that's why there are two sort of branches right now in any DeFi conversation. Right, there are firms that are really totally operating in a completely decentralized manner. But the entities, right, the actual companies that have gotten the most investment, attention, all the rest are actually corporations, right, that offer services in this area, but to help address and to make easy that on ramp, off ramp, and conversion conversation easier for customers. There really is a more of a hub and sort of spoke model out there. Super interesting stuff.
Yeah, I've been reading about it, and one of the things that crossed the screen was a new crypto, and I didn't do all the reading, but it had something to do with protecting copyrighted content, which, as a writer, that was interesting to me. So I'm going to dig a little deeper into that. Have you seen what I'm talking about? It was just introduced, I guess, in the last week or two. A coin that is tied to content and written content. So I guess it's a type of NFT, but I'm not really positive what they're setting up. But apparently it's fairly successful because the guy's already a billionaire. So, somebody bid it up, right? So
absolutely, yeah.
But those NFTs that are out there now and protecting digital content, whether it's images or pictures, paintings, or content that's written, or music. I've got a feeling that's got a long way to go, and it's an interesting thing for me to watch anyway. And we talked about a company a while back that had something to do with that, and I don't even remember what it is anymore. There's just so much going on. So let's talk about the future trends for crypto development then, in this environment of just rapid expansion, right, of ideas and uses. You wrote an article called Bitcoin, Ether, and the Flippening and Future Trends of Crypto Development.
Yeah.
What the flip is the Flippening?
Sure. So the core idea behind that idea, right, the Flippening, is that ultimately Ether will overtake Bitcoin in terms of actual market cap, in terms of being the most valuable cryptocurrency out there. And the underlying argument for that is that obviously Bitcoin gets all of the focus, all of the hype, all of the sort of market commentary, right? Because it's the biggest, baddest, most highly, I think, valued right now crypto out there. But in terms of applications, in terms of actually being the basis for other DeFi use cases or other blockchain, use cases, Bitcoin really is not doing all that much. Whereas Ether, running on the Ethereum blockchain, that is the basis for NFTs, DeFi, and the actual smart contracts that help those applications connect and interoperate to other IT. And so a good sort of parallel that I always try to highlight is actually what makes companies like Apple worth $2 trillion. Is it the iPhone itself? No, right? Because we have phones that are basically the exact same thing now from Apple, Samsung, Google, host of other companies, right? But it's that platform. It's the app store. It's also the network impact of having that platform. And so the argument here is that Ethereum and Ether are basically transitioning into the platform for all of these new blockchain-based applications. And so as that happens more and more, it is, I think, pretty logical to estimate that Ether will, if not overtake Bitcoin, be more on par with it going forward.
Wow. And there's a pretty big gap right now.
Yes, there is. Yeah. I think, yeah.
So if I was just purely speculating, I could hold Bitcoin, if I was super rich already, hold Bitcoin long term because it's scarce. And even though, well, what did we figure out? It's 2%, or what did we read? 2% of the accounts hold 80% of the Bitcoin.
Yes.
So to me, that means that a lot of Bitcoin has to trickle into the system over a very long period of time, because obviously if they dump 10 or 20% of the Bitcoin out of these accounts, it would crash
the price. Yeah.
Right. So I think it's safe to presume they've been trickling in. Because I know that number was like 90% a year ago. So they've been trickling into the retail desire for it, and you have a lot of people chasing it. As a guy that's trying to measure supply and demand of any asset, right? As an investor, I'm looking for where the inflation is. So I want to go to whatever asset class or particular asset is inflating, because I want my value to go up. And I wonder if Bitcoin, as some of these Bitcoin trickle in, right? People have living needs, tax needs, whatever it is. They have a need for a boat, whatever, or a Tesla maybe again.
Yeah.
So at some point, I wonder if Bitcoin hits a plateau for a long time. And does that help it, hurt it? I don't really know. But if Ether, to me, the thing that's interesting about it is the smart contracts. That, to me, just could be gigantic. So I own a little bit of Ether. I've said publicly that I've traded Bitcoin a few times and done very well. And I don't really own any Bitcoin, a fractional share at this point. And I'm starting to accumulate some Ether because I think that those smart contracts and the other things that are based out of that ecosystem are pretty interesting. So the Flippening makes sense to me. Do you have any idea on a time frame, or is it all dependent on the madness of crowds?
I think that trying to estimate a exact time frame for this is really a fool's errand. But there are 2 points that I want to point out here.
Okay.
So the one is that a big component of this is going to be what the policy ends up being in terms of tax, enforcement, compliance. Is there a Bitcoin ETF in the marketplace by August? And how does that impact the inflows into the broader ecosystem and into these tokens? And then 2, how quickly are these applications, right? Again, sort of piggybacking on that compliance policy point of view. And I know that everyone in the blockchain crypto space always hates talking policy, but if we have DeFi NFTs out there, right, there is going to come a point where the oversight agencies, right, be it the SEC, the IRS, whomever, are going to have a point of view on these transactions and on these firms. Just actually earlier this afternoon, the IRS, and I forget who else, but the IRS came out saying that actually starting, I believe, ASAP, they were going to launch a probe into actually Binance, the world's biggest crypto trading platform on allegations of, I think basically money laundering. So I do think that the actual outcome of the price per coin, token, currency is going to be in part based on the demand for it, right? From institutional players, individuals out there, but also the outcome of these policy actions, which are honestly just getting started right now, are going to have a big impact on how the ecosystem actually turns out.
Right. So the ETF thing with Bitcoin has been interesting to me. If you take a look at gold demand from before the pandemic, the demand for gold is up across central banks, technology firms, jewelry, and just other consumer uses and industrial uses. The thing that went down from about September until recently was ETF demand for gold. And that was the one thing that drove the price to basically stagnate, move sideways and a little bit down for 2 quarters. If there's a Bitcoin ETF, that seems to me that there could be a heck of a spike in price and then a heck of a collapse afterwards. So as a trader, I think to myself, I'm going to keep an eye on this whole Bitcoin ETF thing. I've actually sent letters to the SEC and to the Treasury Department. I don't think that there should be a Bitcoin ETF. I think that if you want to own Bitcoin, learn enough about how it works that you can buy it in your own purse. I think that goes towards the whole know your investment thesis or idea. It's, we get regulated based on that. So I don't know that it makes a lot of sense in my head that we would even have a Bitcoin ETF. You take a look at Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, and that trades at a pretty significant discount. I think that discount should be there. I think that it's important that discount is there so that people have an incentive to learn how the real thing works. I turned 51 this winter. Maybe I'm getting to be an old fuddy-duddy, and I should just embrace the wild swings, and I should get rid of my inner Charlie Munger. But
I'll sit out there. Yeah.
Yeah, but do you think there's some validity to the idea that maybe they won't do the ETF?
Well,
it seems like we're moving in the direction of having it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that we are much closer to having a Bitcoin product, be it an ETF or some other product now, as opposed to 2020, 2019. But It's also critical, I think, as I'm sure it's always important to analyze who is advocating for this ETF product, right? It's the institutional players who can then in turn have this product be in their arsenal, basically, to offer to high net worth individuals, other new investors, and also the whole IRA angle of this goes uncovered quite a bit, meaning that right now I understand Bitcoin, hopefully, right? But I can't add Bitcoin directly into any IRA product outside of a SD IRA. And I can only get into a self-directed IRA through really a handful of entities out there. So that whole IRA story, it's the exact same argument behind why a firm does a 10-for-1 stock split, right? To have that price be more appealing to mutual fund managers, right? So right. It's partially based on the merit of the idea, opening access to Bitcoin, all the rest, whatever. Although all of that is already out there because I'm able to buy fractional shares of a coin, right? And I also do think that there is a push out there now from the financial institution side of it too, right? To try to attract funds, attract investors into their current products. They aren't able to actually do it now until a crypto Bitcoin ETF product actually is out there, personally.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that, to me, those are compelling arguments are actually, but we'll see. The financial industry usually gets what it wants.
Yes, sir.
So we'll see how that goes. So I guess let's talk about the future of crypto development, and where do you intuitively and based on your research think that we're going with the crypto dollar, and to what extent does that actually help the potential for the dollar to remain reserve currency? And I have an idea about this. I don't know if they'll go the direction that I think they should go. Again, my guess is they won't. But I think that if they have a fixed number of crypto dollars that essentially work the way that a Bitcoin would, that the dollar would remain reserve currency for a very, very long time. I think there's a way to manage it. I could be very wrong about that. But what do you think about the crypto dollar in general, and then in relation to keeping the dollar as reserve currency? Because I don't think most people know or accept or feel, especially in this era of fiat, fiat, fiat chanting, as an American, I think that the dollar is kind of the free ride of the planet. I mean, I think we get quite a bit out of the dollar that I just don't think that people understand what it would potentially be like without it having such a huge role in international commerce. That's a big question. There's a lot in there. So if you want to read me your book, go ahead and read me your book.
All right, hold on. Let me get it out. No. So probably the easiest part is my own points of view on this topic. And I think the push towards a crypto dollar, tokenized dollar, blockchain-based dollar, it's here, and I would be shocked if within maybe conservatively maybe 2 to 3 years there aren't real, actual pilot projects out there at a commercial enterprise sort of level to try to mesh crypto blockchain on top of or into our current fiat payment systems, right? Because all of those efforts are already underway. JP Morgan, PayPal, eBay, Square are all offering options of that kind. Visa, MasterCard. So all of that is going to happen. It's only a matter of, I think, when policymakers are comfortable with the idea of it. Right. And so then, too, how critical is that to having the US dollar hold on to its current status? I don't think it's critical, right? Because the whole push going forward is, okay, fine, for transactions at the enterprise level, commodity level, nation state level, these transactions have to be easy, cheap, and able to be done in a efficient manner. And adding not everything, but adding aspects of crypto and blockchain to the US dollar will help that happen, right? And it's always, I think, sort of important to note, I know Russia gets a lot of headlines these days. Russia, Iran are in the headlines quite a bit, but there is China out there that are currently working on testing using their own crypto yuan. And I do know that there has been some sort of tepid commentary on it recently, but I mean, it's going to happen there. And so trying to make the currency, well, ultimately, the argument here is that the currency of a country is going to be part of that country's foreign policy going forward, outside of actually having the money, right? Obviously, but then how easy is it to access that money, use the money, all the rest. And so by adding elements of crypto blockchain-esque technology to our current fiat currency is a absolute must. And then ultimately how this all plays out in terms of a timeline or in terms of how it's going to end up, I would argue that the IT side of it works, right? Blockchain works, crypto works. We all know that, right? That works. So it's really just a matter of, one, having the policymakers over in Washington actually focus on a actual topic for a change, and and then also keep in mind that in order for a currency to have real power, it has to work in the country, but it has to work outside too, right? It has to be taken, accepted, and used outside of the country, which I think right now is a issue being overlooked in terms of all of the money printing that is underway.
Right. So way back in 2012.
Way back machine.
Way back in 2012. I mean, this is like a whole different millennium or something. So I first read about Bitcoin way back then because that paper came out in what, 2009?
Yeah.
I think that was right.
Yeah.
So I was writing for MarketWatch about the future of energy for the most part is what my job was.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically said in 2012 that the United States would be essentially energy independent by 2019. And I use the term self-sufficient because, yeah, we're going to keep getting a lot of oil from Canada. But my argument was that our reliance on the Middle East would fall dramatically to the point where we basically just used it for diplomacy, that we wouldn't really need it if we didn't want it. But I also knew back then, having toured several oil fields by that point, because I had called the shale boom ahead of Citigroup and Goldman Sachs. That's how I got the gig at MarketWatch. And I always have believed that oil and the dollar were tied, the petrodollar.
Mm-hmm.
And if we were moving towards digital currencies, which I thought was pretty apparent way back in 2012, and if oil was going to become less important, and 3 years later I said that we were at the beginning of the end of the oil age and got laughed at, well, here we are on this, what I'm calling the peak oil plateau, where demand for oil is basically sideways, with this gully for the pandemic. Demand for oil is about to double top, maybe a little bit higher, but not much. And then we have the EV revolution. So we need a way of getting from petrodollar to just the dollar being a big deal. And to my way of thinking at the macro level, we need to get to a point where we're almost balanced budget, running a 1 or 2% deficit. You're always going to run a deficit. I think that, we're all dead, right? From Keynes is true, right? In the long run, we're all dead. But we need to move back towards a more balanced budget at some point as the baby boomers pass on. That attrition, that leveling of the population will happen over the next few decades. I wonder if the United States, this is the idea that I posed way back in 2012, and I think it's relevant again today and important. Does the United States become a gigantic Switzerland, right? Can we maintain enough trust and balance to go along with all the other benefits of America, right? We're on the best piece of geography in the world. Oceans on two sides, essentially friends on both other sides. We're not going to get invaded probably. Everybody here owns a gun anyway. So, you start looking at this and you're like, the dollar to me, if we don't screw it up, should be the world reserve currency. And I think the euro would be second. But then I take a look at the yen and I think, they have even worse demographic problems than anybody else on the planet. However, I think they're to the point now where they may be starting to get over it. So what happens if they become another Switzerland type economy or Singapore? I think there's arguments to be made that there's challengers to the dollar. I don't think it's the yuan because I don't think anybody trusts them. I've been teasing my members for a year now, just calling them the commies, and sell all your commie stocks, I tell them. And they're like, what? I'm like, sell your commie stocks. I had a professor tell me a story in 1989, I think it was, a dissident professor. He goes, look, the Chinese have always just hung the carrot out in front of you, and then they move the carrot, so, and then does anybody trust Putin? So to me, the dollar naturally should be the reserve currency. We have to be respectful of that. We have to not do some of the bad things that we've clearly done anymore. But I think that the dollar, if we can bring it into the modern age, I think is a very good thing for pulling people out of poverty around the world, because the despots around the world, the authoritarians around the world, they use their currencies to beat up their own people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the beauties of Bitcoin, right? I think that Bitcoin, there's an argument for it's good for getting rid of some authoritarianism, but wouldn't the dollar be better? I look at this gigantic puzzle, and obviously it's a capital thick book that you'd have to write about it, right? I tried to make my way through that book twice, and my head starts to explode. I've read the general theory 3 times, and I've tried to read Capital, and I'm just like, oh, capital. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this French guy. But, so do you think ultimately all the things that make the dollar can be transferred digitally and then made even better? Because I think there's a way to merge the good of both and just make something amazing. I worry about the people doing it.
I would say so, yes, right? Because to your point, I mean, there are any number of attributes and positive qualities that in turn have actually made the dollar the backbone of the world, of the whole world, right? And so really, I mean, all that we're talking about is one, taking some, I'd say, common sense steps to show that we don't abuse that sort of privileged role that we currently have. One, which is a whole separate issue with politics and all that involved. But over here, basically, all that we're talking about is, I do have this tremendous asset from a foreign policy point of view, economic point of view, and all that we have to do is update it. All that we have to do is do what every company, every person does anyway. Update your assets, update your IT, update your homes, your cars, your wardrobe, hairstyles. As the external conditions change, we have to change along with it. And I do believe you actually pointed out something that I think is going sort of talked about right now, is that, okay, fine, if the peak oil demand has passed, and I have been hearing that I believe demand for oil is equal now to, I think, back in 2008. Okay, fine. So how do we keep the US dollar involved in all of those types of transactions over the whole world? To your point, we have to update it. It has to be digital, easy to use, efficient, and to be able to be deployed both for transactions, but also, and I believe this very, very firmly, as a tool of foreign policy to try to counterbalance other players out there who probably aren't as trusted and absolutely aren't as transparent with their motives.
Right. So I started the conversation deliberately on the definition of money, because I don't think that most people think that through. I know that when you get to that in Econ 102, right, your first macro class, most people have already got what one of my professors called MIGO. So this is a shout out to Professor Hollahan, who's now retired. MIGO, my eyes glaze over. Oh, what the hell is he talking about now? Right. My worry about them developing the digital dollar, crypto dollar, whatever they're going to call it, is that they focus everything on medium of exchange. And that's important because that makes the tool work. But I think that they need to add a store of value element which is why I don't know what the number is. I don't know if it's 200 trillion or 300 trillion. I don't know how many crypto dollars get put in the initial vault with only minor adjustments for inflation and countries that peg to it. So if countries peg to the crypto dollar, then you can create more crypto dollars based on that country coming into that system. And it's a way of recruiting into the system, right? I think there needs to be an element of store of value built into the crypto dollar that the Fed can't just, as Chairman Powell said in one of his interviews last year, click, 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 we have more money. We have to have a control on it somehow. And it doesn't mean that we can't increase the number of crypto dollars out there, but I think it has to be formula, part of a formula. It can't be discretionary. It can't be MMT. It can't be just because we want to dig our way out of a hole that we weren't responsible enough to deal with a 40-year window that we had to deal with, say, the baby boomer demographic shift. We knew in the 80s when I was a kid that this was all coming. We didn't do anything about it. We didn't do the lockbox, which Al Gore came up with, as an idea, which actually to me makes sense. And maybe I'm missing something there, but I think that we should segregate out Social Security into its own portfolio of U.S. Treasuries and maybe S&P 500 or something for just to defray inflation. But, I think that if they, and this is how I'm going to determine whether or not I want to hold a lot of it and whether or not I become an expat, right? And how much Ether I own and how much Bitcoin I own is when they introduce the digital dollar, do they have some sort of a reliable, reasonable, sensible store of value element to it, which means that I think they just have to limit how many they create and then how many they add versus Fed chairman says that we need counter-cyclical policy of another whatever. How many dollars have we printed in the last year, QE'd in the last year? 4 trillion, 5 trillion, 6 trillion. It's hard to really know. And it's impossible to wrap your head around it because the numbers get so big. I mean, once it gets to be a number that you couldn't count to in your lifetime, I think it's a little bit incomprehensible. Have you done those experiments when you were a kid? Just start counting and see how high you get in an hour. Yeah. Now multiply that by all the hours that you're going to live in your life. And you're like, you didn't get very high. So, I think it's just super interesting. I'm going to keep reading your articles because I tell you, I bought the Forbes subscription for your articles because I could get most of the stuff for free otherwise. But I was like, well, there's certain stuff behind the paywall garden that I want to see. And you're one of the handful that you just got to see. Everybody.
Thank you.
Dr. Sean Stein-Smith over at Lehman College in New York, talking cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and everything else. And hopefully he's on again. I will put up some links. You should be seeing them right about now. That's a cue for the producer. And we'll get those out to you in the links on YouTube. And I'm launching my podcast via Substack soon. So we should have quite a bit of content for you. I hope you liked this and fire off your questions down below and I will try to get to them. And if there's something that's particularly interesting, I'll send it over to Sean and see if he's got a take. Maybe he'll put it into an article for you. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. I hope the weather is getting better and I hope the restaurants are opening up. It's finally starting to happen here in Wisconsin.
Awesome.
All right. You take care.
Thank you so much, Kirk.